Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth. Ethan Blackwood was the kind of man people pointed at in admiration. His name appeared in business magazines beside words like visionary and self-made. He drove luxury cars that turned heads at traffic lights and attended invitation-only galas where powerful people laughed at his jokes. To the outside world, his marriage to Lena seemed like another symbol of his success. She was elegant, soft-spoken, and always stood beside him with a polite smile, her hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly. Friends envied them. Strangers assumed they were happy. Inside their glass-walled mansion, the truth felt painfully different. Lena spent long afternoons alone, the house echoing with silence. Pregnancy had changed her body and emotions, leaving her tired, nauseous, and anxious. She needed reassurance, gentle words, and presence. What she received instead was distance. Ethan came home late, if at all. When he did, his attention stayed glued to his phone, his replies short and distracted. If Lena mentioned back pain or dizziness, Ethan sighed as if she were listing inconveniences on his schedule. Doctor appointments were bad timing. Her cravings were dramatic. Her tears were met with irritation instead of concern. The warmth that once defined their relationship had slowly drained away, replaced by impatience and emotional coldness. At night, Lena lay awake listening to Ethan move around the bedroom, already half absent even when he was physically there. He rarely touched her now. Conversations felt forced, reduced to logistics rather than affection. When she tried to talk about the baby, hoping to spark excitement, Ethan nodded without looking up, already mentally elsewhere. Lena could not point to a single moment when everything changed, only a growing ache in her chest. Something was wrong. The man she married was becoming a stranger, and no amount of wealth or public admiration could fill the loneliness settling into her heart. She sensed a distance widening between them, one she feared she no longer knew how to cross. Each day, she smiled for the world while quietly wondering when love had turned into endurance, and why she felt so completely alone now. Lena's pregnancy did not unfold the way she had imagined during those early, hopeful weeks. What began with excitement slowly turned into anxiety as her body struggled to keep up. Frequent dizziness, sharp abdominal pains, and sudden exhaustion sent her to the hospital more than once. After a series of tests, the doctors grew serious. They explained that there were complications and a real risk of early delivery. Stress, they warned, could make everything worse. Lena needed rest, stability, and above all, emotional support. She listened carefully, nodding while her hands trembled in her lap. Her first thought was Ethan. Surely this would wake him up. Surely the reality of losing their child would pull him back to her side. She imagined him sitting beside her, holding her hand during appointments, asking questions, protecting her. That hope carried her through the first few days. But Ethan's reaction crushed it. Instead of concern, he showed frustration. Hospital visits interfered with meetings. Phone calls from doctors came at inconvenient times. He complained about traffic, about waiting rooms, about how exhausting it was to rearrange his schedule. When he did show up, his presence felt hollow. He kissed her forehead out of obligation, checked his watch, and answered emails while doctors spoke. Affection became routine rather than sincere. His touch lacked warmth, his words sounded rehearsed. Lena felt like a responsibility, not a partner. Slowly, without argument or confrontation, she stopped asking him to come. It hurt less to expect nothing. Soon, Lena found herself sitting alone in sterile waiting rooms, clutching medical files and ultrasound reports by herself. She watched other couples whisper and hold hands while she stared at the floor, fighting back tears. Each appointment reinforced the same painful truth: the baby she believed would heal their marriage was instead revealing how broken it already was. And with every lonely visit, Lena felt herself slipping further away from the man she once trusted completely. Vanessa Cole entered Ethan's life with effortless confidence, the kind that demanded attention without asking. She was striking, impeccably dressed, and sharply ambitious, moving through exclusive lounges and private events as if she belonged everywhere. Where Lena carried quiet grace, Vanessa radiated hunger. She listened to Ethan with admiration that felt intoxicating, praising his power, his wealth, his control. To her, he was not a husband or a father-to-be. He was a prize. Vanessa never pretended to respect his marriage. She mocked Lena's pregnancy with thin smiles, calling it inconvenient and poorly timed. The baby, she said, would chain him to a life beneath his potential. Every time Ethan hesitated, she reminded him of what she offered instead: excitement, freedom, and admiration without responsibility. She demanded 5-star dinners, weekend trips, and promises whispered over champagne. Time, money, and loyalty were not requests to her. They were expectations. Ethan gave her what she wanted with practiced ease. He lied smoothly, telling Vanessa his marriage was basically over, that Lena was fragile and distant, that he stayed only out of obligation. He painted himself as trapped, misunderstood, and deserving of happiness. Vanessa believed him because it suited her to believe. At home, Ethan wore a different mask. To Lena, he insisted everything was fine. Work was stressful, he said. The distance was temporary. He dismissed her worries with casual reassurances and empty smiles. He never mentioned Vanessa, never admitted the truth, never acknowledged the double life tightening around him. Each lie made the next easier, until deception became routine. Behind the curtain of luxury and secrecy, Ethan balanced two worlds, convinced he could control both. He failed to see that while Vanessa sharpened her demands and Lena silently endured her pain, the consequences of his betrayal were already quietly taking shape. Every choice he made pushed them closer to disaster, though Ethan remained blind, intoxicated by control, unaware that the truth he buried would surface, unforgiving, at the moment his arrogance left him with nothing to protect, nothing to hide behind, and no escape from the damage he had caused himself completely. Late one night, Lena woke to a sharp, tearing pain that stole the air from her lungs. She barely had time to sit up before panic flooded her senses. Warm blood soaked through the sheets, and her hands began to shake uncontrollably. Her heart pounded as fear wrapped tightly around her chest. This was not normal. Something was terribly wrong. Fighting through the pain, she reached for her phone and dialed Ethan's number with trembling fingers. The call went unanswered. She tried again, tears blurring her vision. Still nothing. By the third attempt, she was crying openly, her voice breaking as she whispered his name into the empty room. When Ethan finally answered, his tone was impatient and distracted, as though she had interrupted something trivial. Lena struggled to speak through sobs, telling him she was bleeding and in pain. There was a pause, then a sigh. He told her to calm down, said he would handle it later, and ended the call before she could respond. Alone and terrified, Lena called emergency services. The ambulance arrived quickly, lights flashing against the dark night. Paramedics rushed her onto a stretcher as she clutched her stomach, whispering desperate prayers for her baby. The ride to the hospital felt endless, every bump sending waves of agony through her body. Inside the emergency room, nurses moved with urgency. Among them was Nurse Olivia Grant, whose gentle hands and steady voice offered brief comfort. As she asked for Lena's emergency contact, her eyes searched the doorway instinctively. No husband arrived. No worried footsteps followed. Olivia noticed the empty space beside the bed and felt a quiet ache of concern. Lena lay there alone, surrounded by strangers, facing the worst night of her life without the one person who should have been there beside her. Dr. Rachel Moore met Ethan in the hospital corridor with urgency etched across her face. She explained that Lena's condition had worsened rapidly and that emergency surgery was necessary to save both mother and child. There were risks, serious ones, and time was critical. Ethan nodded absently, his attention split between the doctor's words and the vibration of his phone in his pocket. When he stepped aside to check it, messages from Vanessa flooded the screen. She was waiting at an exclusive restaurant, dressed for him, reminding him of their reservation and the importance of the night. Ethan glanced toward the operating room doors, then back to his phone. The weight of responsibility pressed briefly on his chest, but he pushed it away. He told himself Lena was in capable hands. Doctors always exaggerated, he reasoned. She was strong. She would be fine. Dinner, on the other hand, was already planned, already expected. Canceling would raise questions. Vanessa would be furious. He convinced himself he could step out briefly, calm her down, and return before anything truly serious happened. Without speaking to Lena, without waiting for updates, Ethan informed a nurse he was stepping out for a short while. Nurse Olivia Grant watched him leave with disbelief tightening her expression. The elevator doors closed, carrying him away from the operating floor and from the choice he should have made. At the restaurant, everything shimmered with luxury. Soft music, crystal glasses, and Vanessa's approving smile welcomed him. She praised him for choosing her, for not letting hospital drama ruin their evening. Ethan ordered expensive wine, forcing a smile while silencing the unease gnawing at him. Back at the hospital, Dr. Moore prepared her team, unaware that Lena's husband was clinking glasses instead of standing by his wife's side. As anesthesia was administered and machines beeped steadily, a line was crossed that could never be erased. Ethan had chosen pleasure over responsibility, desire over devotion, and convenience over life itself. He did not see the nurses rushing, nor hear the tension in the hallway pages. He ignored the fragile reality unfolding behind sterile doors. In that moment, Ethan believed control was still his. He believed consequences waited. He was wrong, and the cost of that belief would soon tear through every part of his carefully constructed world. Nothing prepared him for how fast everything he valued would collapse beyond repair completely forever. Lena was wheeled down the bright, silent corridor as the ceiling lights passed above her like distant stars. The pain in her body was sharp, but the fear inside her was worse. Her hands trembled as she clutched the thin hospital blanket, her breathing shallow and uneven. Every sound felt louder, every second heavier. She searched every passing face, hoping to see Ethan rushing toward her, calling her name, telling her everything would be okay. As they entered the operating room, Nurse Olivia stayed close, her voice calm and steady. Lena's eyes filled with tears as she gathered the courage to ask the question burning inside her chest. She asked where her husband was, whether he was coming, whether he knew how scared she was. Olivia hesitated, her lips parting slightly, but no words came. The silence that followed was louder than any answer could have been. Lena understood in that moment. The truth settled over her like a weight she could barely breathe under. Her chest tightened, and tears slipped freely down the sides of her face, disappearing into her hair. She felt exposed, abandoned, and unbearably alone. This was not how it was supposed to be. He should have been here, holding her hand, promising to stay. The doctors moved efficiently around her, preparing equipment, adjusting monitors. Their voices sounded distant, almost unreal. As the anesthesiologist leaned over her, Lena stared at the ceiling, blinking rapidly as the medication began to pull her under. Her body grew heavy, her limbs unresponsive, her thoughts slowing. Her final conscious moment was not filled with pain or fear for herself. It was the realization that the man she trusted most had chosen not to be there. Betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. As darkness closed in, one silent tear escaped her eye, carrying with it the last fragile hope she had been holding on to. Ethan settled into the plush chair across from Vanessa as the waiter poured champagne into crystal glasses. The restaurant glowed with soft golden light, every detail designed to signal wealth and exclusivity. Vanessa smiled approvingly, her eyes tracing his expensive suit, clearly pleased that he had chosen to be there. Ethan raised his glass, forcing a laugh as he brushed aside the unease lingering at the back of his mind. He spoke lightly about the hospital, calling it unnecessary drama, exaggeration blown out of proportion. He joked that doctors always overreacted, that Lena had always been fragile. Vanessa laughed along, her smile sharp and satisfied. She leaned forward, reminding him how peaceful life could be without complications, without responsibility weighing him down. As the wine flowed, Ethan grew bolder. He told Vanessa their future was inevitable, that his marriage was already dead. He promised her travel, freedom, and a life where she would always come first. Vanessa listened closely, then pressed harder. She asked when he would finally leave Lena, when he would stop hiding. She demanded clarity, permanence, and proof. Ethan assured her everything was under control. His voice carried confidence, even arrogance. He spoke of his wealth as if it were armor, something that could shield him from consequences. Lawyers could fix anything. Money could smooth over any situation. He believed that no matter what happened, he would walk away untouched. Vanessa reached across the table, her hand resting over his, her expression triumphant. She told him he was too powerful to be tied down by guilt or obligation. Ethan nodded, convinced. In that moment, surrounded by luxury and flattery, he felt untouchable. Back at the hospital, machines beeped steadily as surgeons fought for Lena's life. But Ethan did not hear them. He clinked his glass against Vanessa's, sealing promises built on lies. He did not know that the world he believed he controlled was already shifting, quietly preparing to show him that wealth could not erase absence, and arrogance could not outrun consequences waiting to strike without warning soon. Ethan was halfway through a sip of champagne when his phone buzzed insistently against the polished mahogany table. He glanced at the screen and saw Dr. Rachel Moore's name flashing. A part of him hesitated, dismissing it as routine, but instinctively he knew it was different. He answered with a casual tone, expecting a brief update, ready to brush it off as another exaggeration. The voice that came through was tight, controlled, but laced with urgency. Dr. Moore's words hit him like a punch. Complications. Risk of loss. She explained quickly, each sentence stabbing at him. Lena was unstable, the situation had escalated, and every passing second mattered. Ethan froze mid-word, the wine glass slipping slightly from his fingers. The laughter and bravado that had filled the air moments ago evaporated instantly. Vanessa noticed the shift immediately. Her confident smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "What is it?" she asked softly, leaning forward, but Ethan barely heard her. Panic began to ripple through him, a sensation he had never allowed himself to feel. He realized with sudden clarity that he had left Lena completely alone when she needed him most. The restaurant, once glittering and comforting, now felt suffocating. Faces blurred around him, music became distant noise, and the weight of his choices pressed down with suffocating force. Vanessa's hand on his arm felt cold and meaningless as the reality of the situation crashed in. Ethan's mind raced, imagining Lena in the operating room, machines beeping, surgeons working against time, and his absence, his selfish absence, leaving her vulnerable. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance. He gripped the phone tighter, voice trembling, trying to process the news, but deep down he knew that nothing he had could undo what was happening. In that moment, his carefully controlled world, built on power, wealth, and manipulation, began to unravel faster than he could comprehend. Ethan pushed the chair back roughly, the crystal clinking sharply against the table, startling nearby diners. Vanessa looked up, her smile gone, replaced by sharp curiosity and a hint of irritation. He muttered something about a sudden emergency and bolted out the door, ignoring her questions and the murmurs of people turning to watch. The cold night air hit his face as he stepped into his black luxury car, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles whitened. The streets that normally flowed smoothly now felt unbearably slow. Every red light stretched on endlessly, every honking horn made his chest tighten. His mind raced as fast as the car, images of Lena's pale face and trembling hands flashing before his eyes. He remembered her tears that morning, her pleading voice on the phone, her fragile hope that he would be there for her. Each memory stabbed him, a cruel reminder of how he had abandoned her. He swerved through traffic, cursing other drivers and stoplights, his mind fragmented by panic. For the first time, fear outweighed his ego, drowning out the arrogance and self-assurance he had worn like armor for years. The luxury he had valued so highly, the dinners, the wealth, the admiration, suddenly seemed meaningless. Nothing mattered except Lena, alone and vulnerable in the sterile hospital corridor. He kept replaying the phone call from Dr. Moore, the tension in her voice, the urgency she had tried to convey. The thought that he had prioritized champagne, conversation, and Vanessa's smile over his wife's life filled him with a crushing guilt that made his chest tighten and his stomach turn. The hospital's neon sign finally appeared in the distance, a beacon of hope and dread all at once. Ethan slammed the brakes at the entrance, jumping out of the car, nearly colliding with the valet. He ran through the glass doors, past the nurse's station, heart hammering, lungs burning, praying desperately that it was not too late. Every second felt infinite, every corridor echoing with the sound of his regret. For the first time in his life, Ethan understood the fragility of control and the terrifying cost of his selfish choices. The operating room doors finally opened, and the tension in the hallway was palpable. Ethan paced frantically as Dr. Rachel Moore stepped out, her face calm but serious. He barely registered her words at first, overwhelmed by adrenaline, guilt, and lingering panic. She explained that the surgery was successful, Lena had survived, and the baby had made it through the immediate danger. Relief washed over him briefly, only to be replaced instantly by a hollow, sinking feeling. Something precious had been lost in the chaos, a piece of trust, a bond that could never be fully repaired. He followed the nurses down the corridor, spotting Lena in a hospital gown, her face pale but serene, lying in the bed that had been her battlefield. Machines beeped softly around her, but her eyes were fixed on the ceiling. Ethan's voice trembled as he called her name, stepping closer. His words spilled out in a rush, apologies, promises, confessions of panic, explanations for his absence. He tried to take her hand, his grip hesitant, desperate to feel some connection. Lena slowly turned her head, her eyes meeting his. In that gaze, he saw the truth he could no longer deny, the warmth, trust, and love that had once defined their marriage had been replaced by cold disappointment and betrayal. Her eyes, though filled with quiet strength, were empty of forgiveness. They did not sparkle with hope or longing, they reflected only the hurt he had caused, the choices he had made that could never be undone. She spoke, her voice steady but soft, cutting through his panic. She knew where he had been, what he had chosen, and whom he had chosen over her. Every lie, every absence, every moment of selfish indulgence had been uncovered, crystallized in that moment of painful clarity. Ethan's throat tightened. He tried to plead, to justify, to rebuild something, anything, but Lena had already taken the first steps away from him. Dr. Moore watched quietly, a shadow of concern on her face. The room was heavy with unspoken words, with the consequences of choices made in arrogance and desire. Ethan finally realized that survival alone did not heal wounds. Lena had endured the unimaginable without him. And no apology, no wealth, no charm could restore what his betrayal had destroyed. He was left with nothing but the stark, brutal truth. He had lost the trust of the one person who had mattered most, and that loss would echo in every future moment, permanent and unchangeable. News traveled quietly at first, whispered behind polished doors and over delicate champagne flutes. Those who had once admired Ethan's power and charm began to notice cracks in the perfect image. Socialites exchanged knowing glances, business associates offered polite but distant smiles, and invitations that had once come easily were now scarce. Word of his absence during Lena's emergency, the betrayal, and his prioritization of a mistress over his wife circulated faster than he could control. Vanessa, sensing the shift in attention and the threat to her own carefully cultivated image, began to pull away. The glamour and excitement she had once relished now felt dangerous. She demanded explanations that Ethan could not provide convincingly and eventually left him, slipping out of his life as silently as she had entered, leaving him with a hollow sense of loss and exposure. Legal processes followed swiftly. Lena, supported by careful counsel, initiated separation proceedings. The documents were cold, formal, and final, stripping Ethan of claims he had assumed would always be unquestioned. His wealth, once the armor that protected him from consequences, now felt useless against the social and emotional fallout. Money could not mend Lena's heart, nor could it erase the humiliation and disappointment that followed him through boardrooms and social events alike. Ethan watched helplessly as the world he had carefully built began to unravel. Invitations ceased, alliances weakened, and whispers replaced admiration. He realized too late that no sum of money could repair the trust he had shattered, no lavish gift could compensate for his absence when it mattered most. The power he had wielded so confidently now felt fragile, almost meaningless, and he was left to confront the painful truth that some mistakes carry consequences far heavier than any fortune could offset, and that losing the respect and love of the people who truly mattered was a price far too high to pay. Lena awoke in the days following the separation with a sense of quiet determination that had not been there before. The pain she carried was no longer only physical, it was layered with the grief of betrayal, the heartbreak of absence, and the exhaustion of having relied on someone who had chosen selfishness over love. Yet, within that pain, she discovered a strength she had not known she possessed. Every scar, every tear, became a reminder that she had endured and survived, and that survival was only the beginning. She rebuilt her routines slowly, focusing on her health, her unborn child, and the small joys that had once been overshadowed by fear and loneliness. Friends who had stood silently at her side offered support, but Lena knew the work had to be hers alone. She refused to let anger dictate her actions, choosing dignity over revenge. She did not seek to humiliate Ethan or lash out at Vanessa, their choices had already defined them. Instead, she focused on reclaiming her life, her time, and her peace. As weeks turned to months, Lena embraced independence. She returned to her passions, engaged with her career, and surrounded herself with people who respected her strength and resilience. Each step forward was deliberate, a choice to live fully despite the wounds of the past. When she walked through the hospital corridors months later, visiting with her healthy child in her arms, there was a confidence in her stride that could not be shaken by memory or regret. Lena's journey became a testament to the truth that betrayal, no matter how devastating, does not define a person's future. She had been abandoned, hurt, and deceived, but she had not been broken. With every decision, every smile, and every quiet victory, Lena proved that strength, grace, and self-respect could outlast the pain inflicted by others. She moved forward unafraid, a woman reborn, whole in her resolve, and unshakable in her pursuit of a life she controlled completely. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth.